efficiency, gross to net ratio. You have to look at how low embodied carbon energy approach can be implemented in design and construction. It's progressive roadmap to achieve carbon neutrality. Carbon neutrality is the ultimate goal. We are at least 50 years away from carbon neutrality, but I think low carbon should be our imagination. Which are not produced from natural resources like fly ash paste. The economy is maturing. We have now managed that. We've seen what I was explaining earlier. Reduction of transport and buildings is a 3-stage process: design, construction, and operation. So the way we do it here is we design to certain standards, target agent who is mandatory on every project. He commissions the project, but what's more important is recommissioning. And then basically you need to do a post-occupancy evaluation as to how the places are functioning as against the design. And this is where the maximum wastage can be reduced. I think maximum happens here because all over the world, and especially in India, wastage can be a lot reduced if you can optimize and rework everything. Short pause here and ask anyone if anyone has questions. We've run through. I've gone through basically why, what to projects. I just would like to check if and ask if anyone has any comments. I have to pause it and go offline because I can't see the comment screen. So if anyone has comments, please feel free to ask it.
Yes, anybody has any? I think they are waiting for the presentation to end. Maybe we will.
To the actual meat of the presentation now, the time passes fast. Abu Dhabi is located in United Arab Emirates. Can you also see my point out as I speak, because otherwise you'll tend to lose track of it, or I'll tend to lose track. So Abu Dhabi, this is where we are. Largest emirate of United Arab Emirates, which consists of 7 Arab Emirates, and was very conservative till around 2005. Pointing out, and this is Masdar, around 30 kilometers located from the edge of Abu Dhabi. So these are what I'm pointing out. What I have on screen is practically the urban growth limits of Abu Dhabi, and that's why it's on screen. I was fortunate enough in 2006 to come and start working on a project here, very similar to the size of Masdar where I'm currently working, which is around 600 hectares or 6 square kilometers. So roughly this is around 6 square kilometers. This is around 38 square kilometers as an Abu Dhabi island, and this was my first project, which was called Reem Island, which is again around 600 hectares. So that's what the geographical limits of Abu Dhabi is. I'll get a little more into the urban framework, and feel free to pause. This is a little bit about history and pressures and why Abu Dhabi emphasized on sustainable development. It's very important to understand history and a background. I do a little research also during when I get interested. So oil was struck in around 1950s in UAE, and in around 1950s and 1960s. Abu Dhabi there was nothing. It was a fishing village. You see a photograph here of 1960s and a map here of 1963, which basically shows the built-up area as nothing because it was very sparse. Abu Dhabi was practically of thatch and probably a ruler's palace in the close vicinity. Money started flowing in. There's always a saying, God made man, man made money, money made man rich, and with the richness he decided to build. So in 1980s, urban sprawl started increasing. Low density development still manageable on the tip of the island, because you've heard the famous term, where there is water, there is civilization. So along the water, the civilization starts. So as it's historical, 1970s built up started here, and the urban fabric started growing towards the edge of the island and going to the land side. 1980s, the primary spines of the city started getting congested or started getting developed. By 2000, Abu Dhabi was reaching a very fast-paced development, trying to compete with the world, and this is more or less the similar view of a similar area along the coast, which is primarily at this point here. So if you see, then it started growing very rapidly, and in 2020, this is where we have reached today. The city did go into multiple plans. So the first urban framework plan, was called as the master directive from the ruler, and it was basically a land use plan which was supposed to be functioning from 1990 to 2021. Fairly, the land use plan and the ODP plans that we are used to in India. When I was working in India, this is the only plan that we had, which had the land use, and each plan was identified by a zone, and that was the FAR you could use. Abu Dhabi was no different. In 1990, in 2006, when I came, I had to visit the municipality, and they said, we don't know how to approve a master plan. So that was an opportunity for me for getting a good job. But so I don't regret it. By 2006, between 2000 and 2020, by 2006, when I came here, the land everyone had started developing. So 2005, 2006, land was gifted. So this is the island which I was pointing out. 3 developers started developing. One developer was given one piece of land. Another developer was given another piece of land, and the rest was kept by the owner of the island. I was fortunate to have worked on the structure plan of these, basically setting up the structure for the developments, because originally there was no accessibility patterns that were for the city. One lane trying to access 6 square kilometers of area and targeting around 12 million square meters of GFA. So, and I used to work for a company who had a project to develop this master plan, which was called the Najma Tareem Island Master Plan. Sustainability had no mention. All my contribution was a master plan. We designed a master plan. When we designed the master plan, we realized that accessibility is going to be an issue. We did some sensitivity analysis and designed a road pattern which we provided to the municipality, because the same company is to provide consultancy to the municipality. The development now is a highly successful development off the coast of Abu Dhabi. If you allow me to go back, that's basically located here. Can you see the screen moved and me pointing out to Google?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is everyone with me so far, or is it, or I'm hoping that everyone is on track. I was also okay. So basically the master plan had three clusters. Cluster-based development. Land use had no basically strict parameters. You could define your GFA and your gross floor area, and you could define the land use pattern and the building height. So basically what we did here was defined it into 3 clusters. One was a marina square, one was a mixed use square, and one was a residential, I would say a residential marina, and all were facing the water. So pretty much a low density development along the waterfront, which seemed to be fairly a good way of developing, considering the environmental concerns, etc. The high end was the high rises were located beyond, with some important buildings accentuating. So this was the typical land use pattern, but again a high density development, because everyone was interested in making maximum money out of the minimum resources they had. Around about the same time, I had the opportunity of working in Dubai. Very much the same pattern. I mean, we had 14,000 hectares here, which included, and the plan, the major structure plan used to always come from somewhere in the world, in US or in Malaysia. This was from US. This was the Palm Jebel Ali was from Malaysia and Hong Kong. So we received the plan, but when you receive the plan, everyone says, I mean, these were like a huge plan. My company was doing the infrastructure, and I was a master planner doing the smaller projects. So basically, these were like around 14 master plans in one project. Each master plan around 600 to 8,000 hectare. I was fortunate to work on one. The rest were developed by someone else. So this was again a master plan. Pretty much what we tried to do here was sustainability became a focus. The thought that master plans have to be people centric was developing, as against a plotted development where everything is strewn around. Here was an approach where the developer was saying, how can we build sensitive, how can we be sensitive to development? So we pretty much developed, I mean, a cluster based approach. And this still seems to be my favored pattern of development, and the world over is very successful. You basically break it down into clusters and see how you can improve. Here we were fortunate that we could pass the road through the development, which over a period of time is not my preferred choice. So that's something. So basically this was split into 4 large clusters, around 5.6 million square meters of GFA to be endorsed over here. So there were 4 clusters. They're pretty much a central area which we developed as a central green. So basically which reduces the congestion from the main spine and basically connects the cluster by a route, which basically we developed a public realm strategy, which basically starts influencing people and starts helping people to develop a well-integrated public realm, because people is the focus. So that's something that started developing. The sustainability in 2007, 2008 started coming into focus. We had the first sustainability roadmap on. This was part of the Nakil development, and we tried to develop a sustainability roadmap. That was my first initiation into sustainability. Coming round about that time, Abu Dhabi had grown into pressure, as I was mentioning. I'm switching slides, but yeah, let me get later on. And by this time we had reached around 2006, 2007, and developments reached a peak. The leaders of the country saw that this was pretty much difficult, and they tried to analyze what's happening here, because resources started being exploited. Infrastructure was no longer sufficient to take care. We had done analysis and shown them if they were to develop in this way, what sort of where would everyone reach? So that's something that the leaders took very seriously. They did recognize it, set up a vision. And by then 2005, 2006, the world was talking about it, that if we continue living the present way, we would need 5 planets. The place is affluent. So in 2005, they realized that Abu Dhabi had the highest consumption of power. They had the sort of highest consumption of water per capita, and the highest waste produced from each household. So it was alarming, and they decided to put the brakes. And there came, they said, planning framework is very important. Till now, there was no planning framework. There was no urban growth limits. It was a land use plan, and that's where the initiative of the planning framework came into picture. As we were developing the planning framework, I was fortunate to be part of that also, and developing place, coming from in India where I was working for the government, knew the processes, was very helpful for me. Basically, we broke it down, the think tank. I mean, I wouldn't say me, because the main consultant was imported from Canada, Larry Bisbee. If you know him, he's an astute planner and known as father of planning, so urban planning. So he came and he first introduced what we called as the Canadian grid, because he was from Canada. And the whole urban growth limits were broken down into districts. So and you can see, I don't have to repeat it. They decided that the capital district would shift from the city to on the outskirts and form the main focus, integrated it with the transport and connected all the districts with a proper transportation network. Along with that, the planning framework was developed. So what we developed was a plan Abu Dhabi 2030, and then a surface transport master plan. The also developed was a systemic plan for Istidama, which is sustainability. So Abu Dhabi initiative and said that sustainability has to be at the core of all developments. By around 2014, safety and security had become of paramount importance. The region was going through a turmoil. They decided that safety and security planning was important, and came a suite of planning documents, which is basically community facility standards, public realm standards, urban design, street urban design manuals, the utility corridor manuals, neighborhood planning manuals, and the mosque development guidelines. So as against a notion that we don't, this part of the world doesn't follow framework planning, a huge framework was developed between 2006 and 2010, feeding directly into the economic plan for Abu Dhabi, which focused on sustainability. And the focus was what happens beyond an oil-based economy. So 50 years down the line, oil may be scarce, you are exploiting fossil fuel, you are affecting climate change, you're doing a whole lot of impact on the environment. What happens to the environment and why should you do it? So that was the whole impact, and all these suit was developed with focus on sustainability. So the developments were enforced, and around about the same time, the government launched Masdar, which is supposed to be Abu Dhabi's flagship project for sustainability, to set the benchmark for sustainability, and basically provide a place for new technologies. So when Masdar was set up as a company somewhere in 2006, 2007, along the same time when the government was realized the importance of the sustainability, that a huge focus needs to be developed around sustainability to make an impact all around the world. So Abu Dhabi was leading the initiative. I joined the company in around 2008. This was a plan which was handed over to me on paper. There was a competition in 2007. I think everyone is very keen to understand the Foster's plan. So this is what is an image of the second version of the Foster's plan. The first version was I went through it. We went through it as a team and engaged with Foster's in London to come out with a more practical solution. So that's where we are. So where did the Foster's plan develop? The number of companies were invited to set up to build the world's most sustainable city. Foster's pitch was a contemporary interpretation of traditional Arabic cities. So there was a study of various Arabic cities, which is basically Aleppo in Syria, Fez in Morocco. So if you allow me to talk a little bit on history and urban form, you can see that most of the traditional urban forms were compact, concentrated around city cores, and that had a reason. Because people were relying on each other. People had a close-knit community as against the spread out community. So communities were compact, and in this part of the world, climate was another huge initiative. Shade courtyards were given and developed. Cities developed organically. They were functioning as activities. People were happy. So they embraced that approach that against a modern city which doesn't completely disregards traditional Arabic cities. A very good initiative on how do you develop a contemporary interpretation of traditional Arabic cities. So they took the principles of Aleppo, Fez, there is Shibam, and there are a few others. Dubai and Abu Dhabi itself are developing compact, and these were the few principles that were set around carbon neutral, zero waste development. Now carbon neutral, carbon zero are all terminologies. I think we should take it with a pinch of salt and acknowledge that they are going to be low carbon for a certain period of time. Renewable energy focused because sun was amply available, consistent integrated environment, an urban built form which basically addresses the aspirations of the people. People wanted technology. People wanted to be modern. The Bedouins, who are the traditional inhabitants of this place, wanted to be better, wanted to live better. So that had to respond to that. So social fabric had to be responded. What came in was a car-free development, again an aspiration about how you can do it, but there are mechanisms you can do it, and basically ultimately a vibrant community and a neighborhood life which responds to the sustainability planning and neighborhood principles. So that's what Abu Dhabi was set up with, and primarily if we can split it into multiple components, the sustainability wise, the three parameters were addressed: environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and economical sustainability. So primarily the whole city was on a compact built form, which is basically the traditional Arabic principles. So it was oriented in the right form, basically orienting itself to minimize the sun. Basically the sun path is shown here, and the whole urban fabric was oriented. Let me go to the plan later on, but the urban fabric was oriented, which was to minimize the impact of the sun. A lot of climatology studies were undertaken, and this was accepted to be a good form which minimizes the sun. Is it the best orientation? Is debatable. Is it a balanced orientation? Yes, because it minimizes the sun and maximizes the impact of the wind, because it also had to take the wind flow into wind direction into consideration, and these were the linear parks were introduced, which basically formed the wind channel going into the whole development. Socially sustainable, human was the center of all. It was human centric. Various facilities were planned around walking distances so that people could walk to destinations, and no facility, the minimum facilities required would be more than 225 meters. This was an analysis done for thermal comfort. This is a walkable criteria in a temperature of between 40 to 50 degrees Celsius. You cannot walk more than 200 meters. 500 meters, cycling, etc. So routes were introduced to basically reach those places, replenish with certain facilities, and then the other facilities came into. A lot of focus on the built form was emphasized on passive measures, which are highlighted, and with a minimum, and so the whole development was laid out as compact square, introduction of wind channels or green form. This is basically an evolution of a pattern which every city, if it is, or a master development community, if it is analyzed in the right way and basically see how it has evolved, you can break it down into its evolution. And this is how Masdar evolved. The city blocks, there were two blocks, 1.5 by 1.5 kilometers and 750 by 750. So the idea was compact, so it would reduce the minimum impact of sun, thereby heat absorption would be less, and the dependence on energy for cooling would be less. You replenish that with wind channels, with basically the green fields. So basically people get access to park spaces, as well as it channelizes the wind, which make it more cooler and helps people. So the urban fabric becomes cooler. You introduce minimum transit corridors. So there is a metro corridor here which passes through Masdar. There is a light rail transit corridor which basically forming a multimodal node here. So that gives you another impetus to basically develop a multimodal transport. And then the street pattern is overlaid, if you see here, with the major connectors and developing, and which basically provides the connectivity. Primarily walkability at this point in time, but I'll explain to you how we broke it down into. And then straight grid lines are boring. So basically you form a nice pattern, responsive street network, create an interest which basically responds to the original organic form, and then you see that at the intersections you start developing good open spaces, plazas, the primary plazas, the secondary plazas, and then within each of that cluster you start developing an internal street network, and then you and then you start developing a form for the parks, you start developing the spaces, and what you get is a master plan which basically responds to the aspirations and the vision that is set out. Just to give you on how compact the city is, normally developments, if you see the development on the left side is for around 20 people per hectare. It ranges from 20 to 50 people per hectare. But to make it a sustainable, what was proposed was a square which is basically works at around 140 people per hectare if you take the full site. Can you see my cursor? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the full site of Masdar. So if you consider the whole site, it's around 140 people per hectare. But when you condense it on a square, which is Masdar's large square and the small square, it's around 220 people per hectare. What it means is if the people were accommodated to a density of the adjoining developments, which we consider are non-compact and many a times unsustainable, you would require a square of this size, which is basically the size that would be required to accommodate the development at the same density which is on the left side. So this gives you an idea of how compact the original plan was and what the principles were used for. Again, this is a land use plan, and what was proposed was, now how do you narrow the streets? So what I typically give it a term of a vertical integration. So if you see here, normally streets are laid where you have the car, which is the transportation. Can you see the middle core?
Yes.
So that is the transportation. Yes. This is how typically the streets were laid out, and this is an illustrative plan. So you have the transportation, on the side of it you have the people, so people walkability areas here, and the infrastructure runs below the pavements, and on the side of that is the buildings. So what it does is, instead of street being 10 meters, the street corridor becomes 20 to 24 meters, and that starts becoming a little bit of uncomfort in terms of thermal comfort. So how do you make the people comfortable is to narrow the streets. And if you want to narrow the streets, what you do is, instead of an horizontal integration, you do a vertical integration. So plus, in addition, the rooftops needed to be used for renewable energy. So the whole concept was, you create this, what we typically call as undercroft below the buildings, which are basements. If you call this as the ground plane, these are the basements. So basically, these are used for the mechanical, electrical, plumbing areas. All the infrastructure went below in a tunnel, and the buildings were run, and the renewable energy was here. So you had the infrastructure core, the transportation core, the people or the pedestrian plane, and the buildings, and all integrated in a vertical integration. Obviously, it was a very expensive proposition, and originally aimed at a few billion US dollars, and people started equating in, well, the question came by 2012 or 2010, can cities keep developing in this manner in this today, and is it a universal solution, or is it a one-off solution which will build and basically die out? So the leadership took a very conscious decision that we need to evolve. We need to find out how can we basically evolve without impacting the original vision and goals, and so we went through a serious exercise, again with Foster's, not that it was avoid, and we developed a new concept of spatial planning by around 2012, 2014. So the concept was, rather than developing it as one project, which basically has roads on the outside, the parking areas segregated on the outskirts, you make it an integrated development basically. So we broke it down into neighborhoods, connected the neighborhoods with green and a transportation network. The major network still remained the same, and basically the industrial areas we needed more space for outdoor. So we transited from one super block here to multiple blocks, which we call as neighborhoods and implemented the government's initiative of sustainable neighborhood planning. And this is how we overlaid it on the same spatial structure, which was a 1.5 by 1.5 kilometer grid and a 750 kilometer by 750 meter grid, and basically saw how the network could be developed as roads. So the whole strategy was, rather than developing one complete project at one go, which is almost impossible for anyone to do it, even if you are rich and even if you are a rich economy, building a project, one super block of 1.5 kilometers by 1.5 kilometers is super tough. So the idea was break it down into a smaller cluster of 500 by 500, distribute. So if you see typically what's done here is basically the city is now of 9 clusters. All the clusters come together within the square. Every cluster has a central community facility node, and then the nodes are connected by an internal transport system, which is what we call as the group rapid transit, and basically the connecting. So this gave developers a flexibility that if you want to develop one whole cluster as a pedestrian cluster, you could still do it. So what you would develop, so the philosophy was you could use your car, park it here, and never need it for the next few days. And you pop up and you come up into the community node, and in the community node you are given a flexibility of moving around in an internal transport, which is integrated with all. So you had linear greens, you had smaller greens facing various. So it created a sort of a sustainable urban fabric, which basically uses the same principles. The buildings within could still be compact, and then basically could be sustainable. We also use the concept of nodes, of how you accentuate certain openings. What are the important arrivals in the city? So this creates city, and basically that's and had a very complementary as against unsustainable non-green resource. We developed it into a very sustainable green community without any compromises. So this is how we transition from a super mega project into a pedestrian friendly community, a sustainable community, which we think it's pedestrian friendly, which is a combination of neighborhood planning, connectivity principles, and thermal comfort. I think I've hit the top of an hour. So will you allow me to continue for another 10 minutes?
Yes, I think you can continue.
If the audience is okay, I think I'll almost try to wrap up, because in another 10 slides. But if you allow me, where we progressed from here, I want to take you through a few other initiatives that were done, and then I can open it out if you're okay.
Yeah.
Is that fine with everyone?
Yeah. Fine.
Yes, sir.
Because I can go on for a couple of hours more speaking about it, but we can take it from there once we finish, and when everyone has anything to ask for. So that's where we reached, and as per the planning norms and framework, the city is divided into 5 phases. So on your left here is, you see phase 1 in blue, phase 2 in red, phase 3 in green, phase 4 in a little dark blue, and then phase 5. We've completed, as for the planning process here, we don't stop at land use plan. After land use plan and the concept plan, we go into a stage called as detailed master plan. So which is very important. At detailed master plan, you develop the actual guidelines, urban fabric, and define how the development is to grow with tangible parameters for sustainability, infrastructure, etc. So the ultimate, so this is how we progress. We basically define the clusters, what the clusters are and how to be developed, define a land use plan along the same lines, and we culminate it with the build form plan. So what comes out of it is a framework plan where everything is laid out, which are the important spines, which are the streets, which are the greens, which are the important activation streets. So to complement it, we develop a public realm interface, because people are important. The cities are for people. Cities are not for people who live only within the blocks. Cities are also not for people who have a very stylistic approach in developing iconic buildings. So to give enough flexibility, we identified the public realm interface. We also defined the private realm interface. If you see, and my thesis has been on a lot of places in Goa, in Margao specifically, where the back spaces or back alley spaces are wasted spaces. So how can you integrate the internal spaces and create a better public realm is a big challenge which we try to address here, and that's an important aspect of planning for the people. And then there are building controls which basically define the height, the foot, the basically the floor plate. And so this is a stage-wise approach, and this is not definitive. This is evolving over a period of time. And then out comes a development control sheet, which basically defines the public realm, the private realm, and basically what are the controls along the streets, etc., and gives enough flexibility for the architect to basically design the urban fabric. That's a three-stage process that we follow. This is primarily phase one. We also did phase two. I mean, phase one, I was working with an architect. I mean, from here on, I have changed my role into a program manager. I deal with from the client side instructions and work with consultants who are appointed. We appoint consultants. So this was done by a company called Ar.Gaurish, which was a Netherlands-based company, in collaboration with UK and a team of professionals. From there on, we did the detailed master plan for phase two. And if you want me to come back to these, let me know at the end of it. If anyone can point out, I can come back to these later on. Very much phase two integrated with phase one. We defined the clusters: innovation cluster, residential cluster, complementary to the commercial, define the land use, define the build form. We basically develop a site plan. So this was a little different approach than what the first one was. The first one was individual plot-based development control regulations, whereas here we developed a cluster-based approach because, again, subclusters, because this was basically addressing to development pressures. Phase one, the plots were too huge. Each plot was around 20 to 30,000 square meters of gross floor area. We get a feedback from the market that they want smaller plots of 10,000 square meters, 12,000 square meters. So we broke it down into smaller plots within the fabric, and that's how we developed a cluster-based approach. So it's very important for sustainable master plan communities to address the need of the people, to address the need of the market. Otherwise, the city dies down or is a dead space. So this is how, as against a plot-based cluster development, this is a cluster-based approach where we still define what are the internal spaces, but the internal spaces are public. I mean, you have each as a 4 plots or 3 plots or 5 plots, whatever the cluster is. And then the interconnectivity is improved with a very good emphasis on public realm. So the public realm flows. It also helps wind movement. Again, the same principle. Minimize the sun, maximize the wind passing through, thereby cooling the building envelope and reducing the energy demand. And also define everything, and then you define which are the active frontages. So define the building blocks and define a cluster. So that's a development control. The third approach was a residential district. Now again, we had the phase 5 of Masdar city. We worked with a company called ACOM. Again, the sort of same approach, and a little different that here, each plot had to be defined, because now, as against a mega plot, big plot, and a small plot, you have to define a residential plot. And that's a residential typology. So the whole square is around 1,600 plots. Each plot has a typology. Each typology sits within a cluster. So if you see what I've laid out here is cluster 1, cluster 2, and cluster 3, and cluster 4 in the same, just for better understanding. And you can identify it from this core here. So each cluster has its unique character, but all are connected by this space, which is an urban space which connects. There is an internal connection, as well as the residential units are external. Okay, so there are major spines, minor spines within which, and circulatory patterns. So the block builds from a plot to a mini block to a super block to a mega block. I think you're familiar with that, and we can come back to this. So that's where we reach, and all these are developed and laid out on a framework plan, which is to achieve a 4 pearl community rating, which is a very high sustainable rating. No one has done more than 1 Pearl rating. We are aspiring to do 5, and we'll be doing it. We'll be registering ourselves now as we are in the advanced stage of development. And as we developed, Masdar's aspirations is also to develop a typology. What's a sustainable type? What's a sustainable footprint in a building for each typology? So in 2010, we set out building an institutional typology, again a 3 Pearl building. As against 3, we developed a 4 Pearl building. We have successfully implemented an institutional typology. We've successfully implemented a commercial typology, and this typology is set to a benchmark of sustainability key performance indicators, and that's how it's developed. So and then in 2020 we also, so this building is around, this complex is around 70,000 square meters of GFA. Don't get carried away by the size of the plan, but this is 70,000 square meters of GFA. This is around 22,000 square meters of GFA, a commercial building which was achieved a 3 Pearl rating and LEED Platinum rating. So if you're familiar with LEED Platinum. A cluster which is 100,000 square meters of GFA. This is a complete cluster built and developed right now and functioning. So this was also a 4 Pearl building and a platinum building. So as against our benchmark of 4 versus the minimum of 1, 3 or 4, as against our benchmark of 3 instead of the minimum 1, we've started achieving 4, and we are striving towards making it business as usual. And lastly, a little bit of initiative that has been my personal initiative is basically the strategy for smart cities. I've started as against the incorrect or notions that high-tech cities can only be smart. We're trying to set out parameters and a framework for a smart city. So as budding students, I would say this is an approach you always need to keep in mind. Based approach or GIS based approach, where we can understand each layering. We need to combine it with BIM. So basically this is a life cycle of a project, which is a concept of geodesign, and which we're trying to implement in Masdar right now for better sustainable performance. You plan the infrastructure. All this can be done in GIS. You design buildings and integrate the infrastructure and buildings in GIS and BIM. And from there, it becomes an asset. So facilities and assets can be monitored using CAFM, and this is built into the first part of my discussion. You plan well, you build well, and you optimize by taking an approach of monitoring and developing a system which can monitor and feed back into the building. So the whole loop can be a cycle, which is very important for developing sustainable plan, sustainable design. So I will not get too much into this, but that's where I'll leave you with some thoughts. That's about it. What's built, what's not built. What you see on the left side is all the developed as-built photos. We've built around 30% of the city. Another 10% is committed and ongoing. And as we grow around, it's targeted to develop and complete around 40% of the development by 2023 to 2024. And so that's the horizon here. And I think that the planning horizon for completing the whole city, which is 3.6 million square meters, is around 2030 to 2035. So I don't know whether I'll be here, but I'm positive that we'll keep moving towards the target. Thank you for being patient. I think I've not exceeded too much of time, and I would leave it now to the audience if you would like to understand anything better, or you would like me to continue or elaborate on any other topic, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes. Thank you, Gaurish. This was very inspiring and very systematically informative presentation. So now I'm sure everybody must have definitely gained a lot of knowledge about sustainable planning and design through your presentation. We would now be open for question answer session. I request all the participants to kindly write in your questions in the chat box as they would be read out now. So
Okay.
I'll just go through the chat box one by one. Yes, we have a question from Professor Geeta Sambrikar. Sir, in case of many Indian cities, the core areas are subject to a lot of pressure of development, especially with respect to de-densification. What could be the best sustainable solutions for the same?
I think in my opinion, and we've tried to do it here, is sustainable. The city cores, I think, I feel are getting degraded and definitely need a revitalization. So in that process, I think it is very essential to remodel, revitalize. We need to take a relook at old city cores and improve the infrastructures for making it very functional. There is an urgent need to address it. I think a lot of the cities are lacking in infrastructure. So one of the emphasis we have to see is, what do the people want from here? Are they willing for an adaptive reuse to revitalize the central coast? So pick up certain important areas and speak to the people, and it has to be a people community, and then basically look at how. I mean, one of the important approaches that developers are taking in the US, and I learned it from our one of our consultants, CBT, in the US, that they try and work with the community and the authorities to keep the external facade the same, and try and work with the authorities and the client to develop the internal, because once you demolish the city cores, you are lost with the urban fabric. I mean, you never get it back. So basically, how do you re-densify them? A lot many city cores are maybe ground plus one. The only way you incentivize people is basically allow them to build a little more. At the same time, the city wants the urban fabric to remain. So the best way is to study the infrastructure, provide it to them, and then probably to keep the heritage and the fabric, keep the facade, work with them, and then come out with an innovative technology to work the inner core to a better performance and better monetary levels, because everyone wants to make a little more money than what they have. They cannot afford to run those buildings at the cost at which they are. So I think adaptive reuse is a good mechanism by which you could do, and that would be a good solution from my suggestion.
Okay.
Sir, excuse me. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
Yeah, especially I mean, in core areas of the city, like say now many cities in case of Indian context are subject to this concept of the development of they are selected for smart city development. So we find that many of the core areas are just erased off, without any second thought. So it is like the concept of public participation needs to be very active, but we find that in many of the cities they are suffering because of this irrational thought, you can say, the way in which the cities are being developing, especially the core areas, where we find that there has to be instead of making it more pedestrian friendly or making it more free of the vehicular areas, you find that they are many of the cities, the core areas, the streets have been widened, and the basic fabric, the traditional the way in which the structures were there are getting erased. So so it's very difficult. How do you feel that
I think
addressed?
I think one of the most important elements to address there is public transport. People depend on cars because there is lack of public transport, and these cores are not very big. I've been to many cores all around the world, and these cores are very isolated areas, which basically, if the transport network around is improved, so the way we see things is, these areas needs a larger transport mechanism. If you heard me talking, we introduced something called as a GRT, which is we have a transport system called as PRT. PRT runs within the cluster from one. There is a personalized rapid transit. That's the smallest vehicle that is available, maybe a 2-seater, maybe a 4-seater. The PRT can be evolved into a GRT, which basically extends to the areas and the size of the street, which is possible to accommodate a little larger vehicle, which is basically what we call as a group rapid transit. And that was we were trying to explore. We can build an Arab fabric, but no one will use it unless you help people by easy movement. So I think as smart cities, I think I've shared some thoughts earlier with a lot of teams who have been working closely. One of the aspects that is very important is transportation. How do you influence reverse migration? Why people want to stay in cities is because they want to come from the outside to the cores of the city and stay and make it re-densify. So one of the efforts should be to incentivize de-densification. So you move people out and supplement it with a proper transportation system. Hong Kong functions very well with a continuous transportation system. I mean, I was suggesting, like in Panjim, in Goa, where I come from, there could be an internal network which runs continuously, instead of having to wait for people, it could just run continuously, connecting the densified areas, which basically people will. It's called a hop on hop off bus, which is public transport. So smart cities should move towards addressing people's immediate needs rather than having large mega goals, because mega goals you really can't implement unless you understand the people's needs there. So if you see Masdar, we tried to do that because that's the whole primary. You can't keep people away 1.5 kilometers away from your car and expect them to live there. So we had to break it down into smaller, connect it with an internal system so people can, as I said, drive in, probably never use their car and don't use their car. And when they don't use their car, the street will become activated for the people. The street will remain a street rather than being a car city.
Yes.
That approach should help, and I think that is probably, if I give an opinion, I think that sort of an introspection is missing currently in the towns. I think there is a leadership's wish list, but it's being looked at as more an infrastructure approach rather than a people's need approach in terms of transport and urban fabric. I think transportation and urban fabric needs to do first before you start implementing sewage systems and other infrastructure systems. I think the smart city system needs a little bit of a reverse engineering approach right now.
True. Yes. We have another question from Dr. Rupali Kavilkar. She says walkability and cycle tracks are planned in Masdar around 200 meters to 500 meters radius.
Yes.
What other initiatives are taken other than the above? And the main question is, are these used by public the way it is intended?
Yes, I mean, if I can, the Masdar master plan is available all over, and if you take the cycling, so Abu Dhabi government has a very, very good initiative of a cycling master plan for the whole city. So the master plan came and stopped at the Masdar boundary, and they expect certain developers to take it on. So today I can say that we've got the largest network of a cycling network, which is around 9 kilometers. So if you Google out, and if you want any document, I can share with you. We have something called as the Urban Design Street Manual, and so street manual defines certain routes. So one of the slides which I had and probably didn't go into much depth is. Can you see my screen again?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a very important diagram so we've got this. So if you see the multiple modes of transport, so the Foster's master plan had only walking and cycling. So every street could walk everything. So it also had something called as a PRT, which basically is a point-to-point transport. So the way it's functioning is the internal network within a neighborhood is replenished with walking and cycling networks, which runs through. And there is an overall cycling network. I don't have a diagram, I can share it later, which defines the cycling route. So the major avenues, this is the boulevard, this is the avenue, are having a cycling routes. And to our surprise, the surrounding fabrics use it more than Masdar, because Masdar is not so much habitat right now. We just have around 7,000 people living inside. But the surrounding fabrics who did not have a safe environment to walk and cycle have started using it. So yes, so we have walking routes, cycling routes. We've got the PRT within the cluster, which we've developed. We've got electric vehicles. We did pilots with Mitsubishi in 2010. Now the Chevy Bolt in 2014. We are working. We have introduced electric chargers in the exteriors, basically to influence people to use electric vehicles. And very soon we are also right now doing a pilot with these are the initiatives. I think if I understood your question correctly, you are asking the initiatives. So basically we are doing a pilot with a vehicle called Navia, which is a French technology. So basically that runs within the streets from place to place. So if you see if you allow me to point out to this plan, the right now the vehicle, which is Navia, runs within this pedestrianized course, which is basically a 2-meter size of vehicle and moves all around and shuttles in between from point to point. So from building to building, you've got the Navia or the electric vehicle. From building to building, you have pedestrian, you've got an electric vehicle, or you've got a walking routes which are integrated within the fabric. So if you see here by the side of it, there is a cycling track here, and similarly around. So all these major routes have got a cycling network around. Yes. Plus, it's got a cycling network all around, which basically people are well connected with the clusters. So the clusters are well connected with the cycling network here, and yes, I mean being less populated right now, I must say that there are minimal use within the city, but it's used more by the people from outside than inside, because they have a cycling ready network.
Yeah, true.
I don't know whether I answered the question in a very straight point, but
thank you, sir.
Yeah,
thank you, sir.
What's your reaction? What's your suggestion?
My question, or let me put it a little more differently.
Uh-huh.
I want to know that one initiative is yes, that you're doing reduced distances, so that people are encouraged to walk. And what is the other initiative? What you've done for walkability or cycling? How do you initiate? Because the climate there, as far as I know, Abu Dhabi and those people there do not, feet is not their first approach. No,
Correct.
They would want the tires. So then, how to move from tires to feet? How do you do that encouragement in that kind of a climate, and whether it is feasible, whether people can walk these distances with the initiative? Like you have to shade them, maybe one, and maybe you have to keep some other facilities there so that you can encourage them to walk. So what are those street level or walkable level initiatives? That was my question. Yeah.
Correct. And that's a good question. I mean, Estidama sustainability has a lot of focus on shading and SRI values. So there are two important KPIs which we have embraced. One is outdoor thermal comfort, and one is called as ecological enhancement. Outdoor thermal comfort emphasizes on the amount of SRI, or street reflectance index, of the material that you're using for the material pavement. What it does is basically it forces us to use lighter colored materials. It also forces to use materials with less. I'm pretty sure you understand SRI values. So reduced SRI values influence reduction in the heat island effect. So one of the now this is good. Allow me to go back to another slide, and probably I didn't go much deep into it. Can you see the slide now?
Not yet.
Maybe so you have stopped presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. You can see, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Now we can see.
Yeah. Thanks for asking the question. Now, if you see this, what it does is that's as against normal streets which are around 12 to 15 meters, we make a conscious attempt to reduce the street and use shared surfaces. As a result, if you see this analysis that was done in the same time of the month, this is a normal Abu Dhabi street, which is a wide street, what I was mentioning to you here, right? So there is a difference of around 11 to 14 degrees Celsius radiation heat that is clearly felt within Masdar city. So narrowing of the streets using sensitive SRI values, and I'll come back to the planting initiatives next. So we have got very stringent material restrictions on SRI values and shading criteria. So the idea is the facade materials have to be certain lighter so that the reflectance of the maximum heat island effect it caused by absorption of the heat and radiation thereafter, as also the reflection from the facades back onto the street and come back. So because of the height and the built form criteria, this reflectance is reduced in a manifold. So if you see the radiant temperature here, it reduces by around 11 degrees Celsius. So compared to 45 to 50 degrees, 36 or 37 is a much better walkable criteria. And these are actual measurements with thermal cameras. This is in city and typical Abu Dhabi and on a street where I live, and this is in Masdar city. That's one.
Okay.
And the second initiative is we have an enhanced KPI for ecological enhancement. So what we say is the minimum shading you can do in a street, and this is at equinox and non-equinox. So there are prescribed criteria in the Istidama standards. You can do with 30% or 40%, but our criteria is 80% of the street or the cycling path should be shaded. So the shade plus the reduction of the reflective index helps a lot in reducing the thermal comfort, and that's what we are doing in a big way. Costs us a little more because we are, but again, it's a life cycle. From there we go into water management. So that ecological enhancement is also tied into local species. So we've got a very strict plant list which basically uses low consumption water. Our target for water is 2 liters per square meter. Wherever, so what we do is one of our KPIs is using 2 liters per square meter for landscape. For cycling intensive street, we've got a concept called as the hydrozoning concept, where we have increased the allowance of water to the hydrozoning streets, which require enhancement to around 4 liters per square meter. So we do a balance. We said that we have to do a balance of 3 liters per square meter. You have to do 2 liters where you don't have the requirements of these, whereas where you have this pedestrian streets and where you have cycling streets, you increase the plants to around 70% shading of the route and allow a little more water allowance so that you strike the balance at around 3 liters per square meter. So that's the whole monitoring we do consistently and do a check and balance in the whole street. So these two important our initiatives are important: reducing the SRI values and doing an ecological enhancement.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Does that make sense to you? I mean, or you think of your ideas on what you think? Yeah, I urge you. It would be good to go through this book. It's called Istidama. It's a manual which is available, and it gives you certain steps on how you have to do enhanced ecology, etc.
Yeah, we have a question from a student. Sir, how can you help make the existing metro cities in India like Mumbai, Bangalore more sustainable, especially considering the scale of urbanization that's going on? How can we have a better approach? So, if without patronizing anyone, I urge you to Google out Studio Pod Architects in Mumbai. They have recently done a very good initiative for Godrej developers, and they're right now working and doing a very good initiative on a project in Lower Parel on how they have introduced cycling and walking
on a very vehicular street. So I agree with you. Current metros are very the major. I mean, Mumbai Fort area may be a different, but there are areas where the public realm in the street is very much neglected. So it's very important to replace some of the wide areas, which is with a sensitive introduction of a cycling or a pedestrian route, which focuses on how the movement is. You have to introduce it's a very good pilot, which you should speak to them, and I'll give you some more clues. I'll send some links to that. So they are our consultants here also in Abu Dhabi. So I get a chance to talk to them. Very sensitive group of architects. So you should talk to them. They have done, and when they have already completed that project in Parel, lower Parel. So you have no way out. The metros will do what they are supposed to do, but it has to be a sensible approach where you study the inner fabric and see where this can be introduced. My thesis project was on Margaon, on revitalizing streets. It's a hell lot of. I wish one day I could document it, but I've had at the time. But these were basically you have a lot of streets which are basically huge paved areas which are practically useless during most of the times of the hour of the day. You need to intervene into those. And government acceptance is very important. So you intervene. It's a reconciling approach. You have to. It's a very participatory approach. But I think India is doing great in that sense in introducing this. European countries have been very pedestrian friendly. I believe America is a failure because they've not been able to do much, at least from what I know, because their streets are wide, they depend on a car. But Europe has done, and there are some good learnings to do that, to study that. There are some studies, Hoffman and who give you clear mechanisms on how to do introductions of these in the city. Probably I'll share with you. I was fortunate that Foster sensitized me to these initiatives, but there are some quite a lot to make. But there's no way out. You have to relook at the width of the cities. Of the streets, introduce where minimum you can do to introduce a tree corridor, a plantation corridor, and basically make them more walkable. That's the only initiative. Yeah. I think it can be done, and look at this Parel project where they have done, because they've really succeeded in doing something.
Yes, we will definitely look into this project. I hope sir has answered your question. There is another question from Professor Jyoti Patil. She says, our traditional towns have always inspired us to build temporary nations, contemporary nations. What are the factors of traditional evolution techniques of built forms which could be considered even in today's context, along with present infrastructural requirements?
I didn't get the question actually.
Let me repeat. Our traditional towns have always inspired us to build contemporary nations. What are the factors of traditional evolution techniques of built forms which could be considered even in today's context, along with present infrastructural requirements?
I think you can just clarify it.
Yeah, can
Jyoti ma'am, are you there in the meeting?
You are asking for construction technology. If I get you correctly, your question is: are there any construction methodologies or technologies which can address infrastructure, high-tech infrastructure?
Yes, sir. Like the overall the evolution pattern of our traditional systems. What we have been seeing, and those things which have inspired us, like those narrow pedestrian streets, mutual shadings, organic patterns, and majority pedestrian approach. And when you look into the material palette, all the vernacular materials. So these were the things which have made our traditional cities more sustainable. So like in today's context or the present development, what we are making as designers. So which are those factors which we can apply? We may not, it's not possible for us to, look into all this, the things which were there in traditional townships, but which are those factors which we can directly apply in today's context of development?
You mean in terms of construction methodology or construction materials?
No, I'm telling like, if you look into our traditional, the patterns, they have not evolved at once, they have taken their own time to evolve. But in today's context, we see that when we make a development as a, designer or a developer, we see to it that the whole thing develops at once. So for me, I feel that when things evolve not at once and evolve over a period of time, are more sustainable and then the things which evolve at once.
Absolutely. Like I can see, I can tell you what we did in Master. I mean, when Foster's first designed some buildings, we used multiple techniques. Like we used glass reinforced concrete panels, which is basically is the easiest way. I mean, we needed to take care of materials, but what architecture evolves, and I fully agree with that. Architecture evolves over a period of time. There is a particular technique now. We use materials. We've got a facade testing laboratory. What we do is we ask different technologies basically and test the facilities for better performance. So for each project of ours, we try and use different technologies and monitor their performance. So that's one thing you can do. I think the second thing that can be done is there's a lot of mud architecture technology available. There is so these are the alternate technologies which can be combined with. We also use what we call as integrated technology. I mean, a steel framework with a combination of other panels. I mean, so the reinforced concrete panels. So panel construction could be one of them. So yeah, I mean, it depends on what technology available, because the structure will remain a structure, and and that's one of the reasons why we have not gone for high rise built form in Masdar city. One thing is it is detrimental to the street and the width because it creates unsatisfactory spaces. And second point is to construct high rise, you need high tech. So the best way to do it is keep it low rise, use more of those traditional materials that need to be used, and then keep improving the performance. I don't think there's a substitute there, right?
True. I think Jyoti ma'am, sir has answered your question.
Yes.
I don't know. Have I? I mean, do you think that's the right way to go around?
Yes, that is right, sir. But my concern was like, when you look into our traditional, the towns or the cities, the ratio of the streets and the build form was, it was maintained very well. But in today's context, in today's context, we still try to believe that traditional pattern of those narrow streets with a low-rise building. But sometimes we try to apply the same technique to the narrow streets and the tall buildings. There are many examples like that. So
yeah, that's what doesn't work very well, because when you use narrow streets and tall buildings, constructability is an issue, and that's an issue. I think the approach has to change, because the intensity, it doesn't work really to go high rise in a low rise development in the manner where cities are developed today. Cities have to respond to its original fabric.
So sensibly, when we want to pick something from our traditional towns, is the material palette, like how it was done to make the development more sustainable in nature, rather than going for the elements of the towns like the streets and all, because we all need to look into today's infrastructural requirement, what is needed. That is how our development should.
And I would say composite materials is one of the better way, where you can go a little better than what original towns were. Like if you use a steel framework with mud block technology, you could use that as a technology to enhance the structural requirements and do the thing within that same given limitations. I think that's one thing that has been successful in many towns. Even in European towns, the use of composite materials is because you don't have to dig, you don't have to cast huge columns, and structural fabric is much more efficient along with mud block technology or panel construction technology. A lot of precast technology is used here, where things are precast either on site somewhere outside or in industrial areas and brought in and constructed. Those could be used to basically keep the same character and the build form within those narrow fabric.
Yes.
And also, sir, in sustainability, do you believe in high density, low rise structures?
Personally, yes. For the reason that high density low rise structures improve self shading of the buildings,
yes,
and improve the performance of the surrounding areas, which gets natural shading. So high density low rise buildings is one of the concepts which is strongly propagated in sustainable architecture.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Gaurish, can we go for 2 more questions?
Yes, you can go for as many, no problem.
Okay.
I'm available.
So I have a question from Vadiraj. He's a student. He says Ahmedabad poles are one of the sustainable neighborhoods in itself in Indian context. The traditional architecture itself bridges the design and climatic considerations. Why is this failing in contemporary urban modules? This is the first question. And is it due to drastic change in materiality or due to lack in design thinking? So he adds it to Jyoti ma'am's question. Like she had a similar query. So he also has this question to you. What is the reason that it is failing in today's context?
Yeah, I've been to these polls, and I think you should look at a study done by Professor Mickey Desai, who has been my professor at Ahmedabad. So he's done a lot of studies, and I've walked in these polls doing studies. I think a lot of the reason happening is because the fabric is of the age of the buildings. So I think one thing that happens to do there is, again, this is linked to Jyoti's question about how so construction. I mean, there needs to be an intervention to basically change the certain construction and improve or rehabilitation of that fabric is very important. It's basically what's causing is the decay of the age of the buildings is basically causing it a problem. So you're absolutely right. I mean, they are interesting places, but there's always a dichotomy. We like them. Do the people living there find them interesting? We don't want them to be demolished, but the people who live in them and people who own them want an alternative, either to sell them or want financial assistance to help. I think there are quite a few agencies who financial intervention is one of the essential requirements to improve these areas. I mean, there's no way out. I mean, they will decay. Improvement has to be done, but you have to go for this. I don't see anything other than a composite materials, because right now the technique of construction is outdated and there is a chance. Well, a lot of them have wooden structures, by the way, which are very interesting, but again, it is not going to be lifelong. So steel and a combination is very much, and I would say, as sustainability propagating, recycled steel members should be used. The panels and infill materials used from recycled materials should be used, and these are very much important to basically keep the sustainability moving, because the current fabric was sustainable to a very large extent.
Yes, I too agree.
I don't have an answer as such, a straight answer, because this is a $1 million question. How do we retain the character of these spaces as well as keep them functioning? A lot of people are moving out, migrating from them.
True.
Or the other option that we have been thinking about is in a large way government initiatives, but how long can the government move on and continue? So basically temporary rehabilitation of those people into build temporary clusters, temporary residential areas to rehabilitate these areas, and then facilitate their return back into the place.
Yes.
So that's one of the alternatives. So there are multiple alternatives probably which could be done.
Yes, true. I'll go for another question from one of our student. She says, "Good afternoon, sir. You talked about carbon footprints and sustainability. For example, if I he's talking if I had designed a whole house maybe in 300 square meters with normal construction materials, and on the other end, I use scrap steel or use waste materials to design the same area. So, sir, just by changing the materials, we use the change of material. How much do we reduce the carbon emissions and aid sustainability? So, just a changeover from the maybe he's talking about the contemporary construction materials to the more sustainable materials. So, how do we reduce the carbon emission? Maybe it's talking about the percentage of how do we make it more sustainable.
Yeah, from our last 10 years of study of this, because I also look at that performance, we have been able to achieve 15. Developers with no inputs from us, except for steel structures. If you use all other materials, we've been easily able to do a reduction of 15 to 30%. So as against the UK standards, which is a set standard of 615, we've been able to do something like between 450 to 475 very easily. The issue we still find is steel. We've not been able to tackle the embodied carbon challenge of steel, and that's why we are saying we still have to. And then so that's a challenge. But other materials, 15 to 30% is easy. And we are now trying to implement it in the public realm also. The use of recycled concrete pavers, the use of recycled concrete steel in manhole covers in the infrastructure development, the use of HDP rather than PVC in the piping in the material. Cast iron is becoming a dangerous material, so you could using recycled pipes. So HDP is equally environment friendly and also cost reduction and a long lasting material as much as cast iron. So these are some of the initiatives we are doing in infrastructure and public realm. We have not been able to actually quantify right till now, because we've just been trying to do it for the last 3 years. Buildings, yes, and so 15 to 30% is possible easily.
So basically, when you reduce the content of steel, because that's the most energy intensive, maybe we go to a more sustainable way of construction.
Correct.
That is what personally I feel. Okay, we'll go to the last question today. We have Professor Pavanika Biradar asking you, what is the percentage of vegetation that is proposed here or in the existing Masdar city? She's asking you about the percentage of vegetation which is proposed.
Vegetation or open spaces?
I think she wants to know about the overall cover, vegetation.
Yeah, so currently the ratio is around 45 to 55%. Okay. So we have got a 45 because of the compact network. We have around 45% open space and 55% is the built-up area. And that again, if you discount the streetscapes, because then that comes to around 35%.
Okay.
As against the normal standards of probably 15 to 18% that is normally introduced in the cities, because of the compact, we've done an open space assessment because we're finding it financially difficult to manage so much of open space. So we're trying to do a efficiency use. So that's where we stand right now.
Thank you, sir, because the main reason of my question was how much you have deviated from the standard proposal of 18%, which usually we end up giving.
Yeah, so I think that answered your question. I mean, the compact nature and reduction in the streets that allowed us to go around 45%. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I have come across another interesting question. Can I go on?
Yeah, go on, please.
Okay, we have Professor Vijendra Gurav asking, can you just elaborate on how artificial intelligence has been used in the overall master planning? He's talking about the Masdar city. Hello.
I have not delved into the the realm of artificial intelligence. Can you elaborate on what your thoughts are on how it can be? Because I would say we've not gone. The only okay. Let me put it a different way around. Again, from the sustainability initiatives. A couple of initiatives that we do is we've got building monitoring systems. Do you mean building monitoring, use of artificial intelligence and technology for building monitoring systems?
I think mostly is Vijendra. Are you there in the meeting? I'm not sure if he's there.
Okay, so
we can take it that way.
No, I can answer, and then you can pass it on. So what we do is, for every infrastructure, we've got monitoring systems. So water, energy, waste. So what we do is we develop all infrastructure to a particular end cap solution, which basically has a interface, which basically then connects it to a facilities management system. And that was my last slide was. We connect all the monitoring system for water and electricity to a central monitoring system. And the plan is we've just floated an RFP for a command and control center. So what will happen is all the individual command and control BMS or the CMS system. The BMS is building management system, and the command and control system that will be integrated with the larger command and control center. The master plan also, so this can be done in two ways. One is hard infrastructure and one is Wi-Fi infrastructure. We have provisions for ICT infrastructure within the street network and that's available, but we've not implemented any hard infrastructure. Currently, we've got a balanced distribution of GSM towers, which basically helps us to enhance the Wi-Fi coverage. Our streets are trying to be smart with smart charging solutions, smart pole solutions, which are being integrated, and all these are connected to the infrastructure is connected to a central CMS system. Projects have their own BMS system, and both are fed into a central. Right now, we don't have a central citywide command and control system because we don't have a critical mass. But I think we are heading towards that in the next 3 years.
Yes, I think you have answered Vijay's question. Thank you so much, Gaurish. This has been loads of information today for all of us, all the audience, about sustainable planning and design. I personally am really have gained a lot today in this session of yours. It's been very insightful presentation. So thank you so much. Dear participants, we will be coming up with our next series, Space Talk webinar series shortly. This is for your information. And to complete with the formalities, I now request Dr. R.D. Kavilkar to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you. On behalf of Karnataka Law Society's Gokta Institute of Technology's Department of Architecture, I am privileged to extend gratitude to today's Space Talk speaker, Architect Gaurish Wagle, Manager, Master Planning, Sustainability, Masdar City, Abu Dhabi. Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful presentation. The sustainability istidama, if I'm correct, strategies which you have presented will be very helpful for not only our students and us, but also for the young architects who will be watching this session. Thank you, sir.
I'm glad. Thank you very much for the opportunity. You've been a great audience.
Yes.
And if you, Pratiksha has my email. So
yes.
if you have any further questions, or you need links to any documents, just let me know and I'll send it.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for the opportunity and look forward to catching up again.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So, have a nice day. We'll end the
You
meeting
too.
now. Yes.
Yeah, it's still only 12 o'clock here. We are 1.5 hours behind.
Okay.
So it's not yet lunchtime. I know you all are anxious. You all are anxious to have lunch, but here it's not yet lunchtime.
Okay.
So during the lunch
Okay,
also
guys,
we'll be
yeah.
discussing about your
About,
presentation.
yes,
Absolutely,
definitely.
yeah. Anytime, no problem. Yeah.
Yes.
It was very
Okay.
nice. Thank you.
Thank
Everybody
you
has
very much.
enjoyed. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.
Done. It was a marathon. It was a marathon.